A wise man once said that true happiness should live inside you, not depend on anyone else. That man was Diogenes of Sinope. Think about how you were raised. Since you were young, people drilled into you the idea that a real man has to bleed for love. That proving yourself as a man means winning a woman's heart. That the chase itself is noble. That longing and suffering for love is what makes you human. But no one told you that this entire game, this pursuit, this fantasy, was designed to break you. They sold you a story, and you paid for it with your time, your pride, your sense of self. Diogenes, the man who walked barefoot through the filthy streets of Athens, who slept inside a barrel, who carried a lantern in broad daylight claiming to search for an honest man, saw things differently. While other philosophers wrote long works about virtue, ethics, or the cosmos, Diogenes spat on convention and mocked the men who enslaved themselves to desire. He said a wise man should be able to carry his happiness within himself. But look at yourself. You've tied your happiness to her smile, her attention, her approval. You've handed over the keys to your own worth, and now she decides whether you feel whole or broken. Here's the truth. You don't chase women out of love. You chase because of what's missing inside you. You think you're running toward affection, but in reality, you're running away from yourself. Diogenes laughed at that. In fact, he once saw a young man blush in front of a beautiful woman and shouted, "Dante, be ashamed. The fault isn't yours. The fault is nature's for making creatures so irresistible to fools. You think your hunger is romantic? You would have called it pathetic? You think your pursuit makes you strong?" He saw it as weakness hiding behind perfume. Diogenes urinated in public. He masturbated in the marketplace. When people gasped in disgust, he simply said, "If only rubbing my stomach could cure hunger too." Why did he do that? It's not because he lacked shame, but because he wanted to expose yours. Because your shame is the leash wrapped around your manhood. But you don't hide your impulses to master them. You hide them. Because you want to look acceptable in the eyes of women you re-chasing. You play the role of a gentleman not because you believe in virtue, but because you think it will increase your odds of being chosen. You wear masks. Diogenes burned masks. You build pedestals. He smashed them with ridicule. You walk into rooms scanning for beauty. He walked into rooms scanning for idiots. And do you know what he usually found? Men like you, desperate, eager, dressed like peacocks, hungry for scraps of attention. Diogenes once said he threw away his cup after seeing a child drink water with his bare hands. He stripped his life down to the bone. And you decorate your cage. You chase silk when you haven't even mastered steel. Here's the thing. Diogenes wasn't against women. He was against illusions. And there is no illusion more dangerous to a man than believing that a woman's love will redeem him. When he has the most, who is content with the least. That's what Diogenes said. But you're never content. You scroll endlessly, swipe endlessly, wait for a text as if it's medicine. You sit alone in rooms haunted by ghosts of women who never loved you or worse. Who once did until you gave them everything and smothered their desire. Society told you to chase, to prove yourself, to sacrifice for love. But Diogenes didn't chase. He stood still and let the truth embarrass the world. Remember this. When Alexander the Great, ruler of nearly the entire known world, found Diogenes sunbathing and asked, "What can I do for you?" Diogenes didn't bow, didn't flatter, didn't try to impress. He just said, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." That is power. That is freedom. But you chase women like their sunlight. You orbit them like planets desperate for warmth. You reshape yourself to fit their moods, their whims, their words. You cut off pieces of who you are just to fit into their desires, and then you call that love. Diogenes would have called it slavery. Not because women enslave you, but because you walked into the chains yourself, smiling bouquet in hand. He once said, "The most beautiful woman in the world is nothing without character, and character is nothing without truth." And here, the truth. Most of what you call love is just fear of being alone, dressed up in pretty words. Most of what you give isn't generosity, it's negotiation. You hand over your time, your energy, your ambition, hoping she'll hand you back a reflection of your worth. That isn't love. That's a transaction, trade dressed in roses. And when the trade fails, when she grows cold, when she stops replying, when she loves you less, the more you love her, you're devastated. But not because you lost her. You're devastated because you lost the only mirror that made you feel like a man. Diogenes didn't need a mirror. He faced the world as it was. No flattery, no false hope. No perfume sprayed over decay. He called out lies until people had no choice but to either laugh or rage. Because nothing makes people angrier than being forced to see clearly. So I'm asking you now, not as a preacher, not as a judge, but as a man to another man. When will you stop chasing what cannot save you? When will you stop mistaking obedience for love, sacrifice for connection, erasing yourself for romance? Because here's the truth. The woman you chase is not your enemy. Your illusion of her is, you think it's loyalty, but it's dependency. You call it passion, but it's addiction. You convince yourself she's different, that this one sees you, hears you, understands you. But Diogenes said, it is the privilege of the gods to want nothing and of godlike men to want little. So tell me, what godlike man collapses just because a woman doesn't text him back? You weren't born to chase. You weren't designed to orbit. You were built to build. But somewhere along the line, they tricked you into believing that your value comes not from choosing, but from being chosen. So now you scroll through dating apps like a beggar. You smile through rejection like a clown. You swallow your pride like it's medicine. You call it dating. Diogenes would have called it decay. This man walked barefoot through Athens, mocked the rich to their faces, lived off scraps like a wolf among sheep. Yet even the most powerful man alive, Alexander, was humbled before him. Why? Because Diogenes had nothing to lose, and the man with nothing to lose cannot be controlled. But you give her everything before she even asks. You lose sleep when she's indifferent. You change your clothes, your tone, your life plans just to align with what she might prefer. Then you say you're being romantic. Diogenes would have barked like a dog at that performance. He would have called it what it truly is. Submission. And here's the harshest truth of all. She doesn't respect it. Not because she's cruel, but because instinctively she knows what Diogenes knew, that anything chased loses value. What runs after something does not possess it. It is possessed by it. And women, whether consciously or not, are attracted to strength, not sacrifice, to sovereignty, not supplication. Your willingness to please has made you invisible. Your eagerness has turned you into noise. You call it love. But what she sees is desperation. And here's the sting. When she finally leaves Aunt, she will act, whether out of boredom, instinct, or simple fatigue, will feel betrayed. But you need to ask yourself honestly, what did you actually love? Did you love her? Or did you love the version of yourself you got to play while standing beside her? Did you love her soul?
Oh.
Or did you love the way her presence distracted you from your own emptiness? Diogenes looked you in the eye and said, I'm looking for a man, not just a male, a man, soul forged by fire, not flattery. A man who can stand naked under the sky and still feel whole. Not a boy who needs a woman's affection to feel like he exists. Not a follower in search of a queen, but a sovereign in command of himself. And maybe that's what stings the most. The realization that all this time, it wasn't her you were chasing. It was the feeling of being wanted. When that feeling fades, so does your sense of identity. So you go back out into the world, bruised and confused, hunting for another savior in lipstick, another goddess to kneel before, another pair of eyes to make you feel like a man. Because you never learned how to feel like one on your own. That's the tragedy. You were taught to conquer mountains, but never your own mind. To chase riches, but not wisdom. To attract women, but not ask why. When you finally stop and ask why, when you look back on your life, you realize it was spent chasing shadows. Women who didn't want you. Women who tolerated you. Women who only loved the version of you that served them. And you thought that was normal. But Diogenes didn't think it was normal. He thought it was pathetic. He once said, other dogs bite only their enemies. I bite my friends too, in order to save them. So let me bite you now, not to wound, but to wake you. Stop chasing what runs. Stop offering your soul for scraps. Stop confusing humiliation with devotion. A man who knows his worth does not chase. He chooses, he builds, he walks forward. And if she wants to walk beside him, fine. If not, he keeps walking. That was Diogenes, and that can be you. But only if you're willing to tear down the dream and face the hard truth. The man who chases women is not noble. He is not romantic. He's not brave. He's lost. And no woman, no matter how beautiful, will ever lead him back to himself. If you've been told this hunger, this pursuit, this a kit's part of being a man, you've watched movies glorify the chase, you've sung along 2 songs that call longing love, somewhere deep down, you've started to believe that suffering for a woman gives your life meaning, that your ability to endure rejection is proof of your passion. But Diogenes would have spat at that idea literally. He once stood before a statue and begged it for arms. When someone asked why, he replied, "I'm practicing for being refused." That was his rebellion, his satire, his way of exposing the absurdity of begging whether for coins or for a woman's attention. And here you are, a modern man with access to knowledge, tools, and freedom Diogenes couldn't have even imagined. Yet you still beg not for bread, but for affection. You call her 10 times after a silent night. You send paragraphs she never answers. You contort your words so you don't seem too strong or too weak. You live in a mental courtroom, defending yourself against accusations she never even made, always hoping to be found worthy in her eyes. And you don't even realize it, but you've become exactly what Diogenes despised most, a man enslaved by invisible chains. Because that's what the chase really is. It's not romance. It's not strength. It's not proof of love. It's servitude. You, brother, are the willing servant. Diogenes once said, "I know nothing except the fact of my ignorance." He embraced his flaws. He wore them like armor. But you hide yours like they're stains. You edit yourself like you're a product. You sell a version of yourself to women, hoping the performance earns intimacy. But real strength doesn't perform. Real strength doesn't adjust itself to impress. Real strength walks into the world unmasked and says, "Take it or leave it." Do you understand why Diogenes, a man who owned nothing, was more powerful than kings? Because he couldn't be seduced not by gold, not by praise, not by beauty. He didn't chase because he had nothing to prove. And until you reach that point, till your self-respect is louder than your loneliness, always chase what you think will complete you, and you'll never be complete. Here's something no one wants to tell you. She doesn't admire your effort. She doesn't respect your persistence. She doesn't fall in love with your sacrifice. She might appreciate it. She might enjoy it, but she doesn't feel drawn to it. Because what compels a woman to stay isn't the man who follows her. It's the man she can't control. And here's the irony. The moment you stop chasing is the moment she notices you. Not because you're playing games, but because when a man finds peace inside himself, when he no longer needs a woman to reflect his worth, he becomes rare. He becomes real. That was Diogenes. He didn't need reflection. He walked through the marketplace in broad daylight with a lantern, saying, "I'm looking for a man." Still, the world couldn't give him one, because most of men even know aren't men. They're roles. Scripts, hollow outlines waiting to be filled by female approval. But the man who stops chasing, he becomes something else entirely, becomes whole. And that makes him dangerous. Not because he's violent, but because he no longer fears being alone. And a man who doesn't fear solitude can't be manipulated, bought, or tamed. That's what Diogenes wanted for you. Not to hate women, not to avoid love, but to stop building your identity around the hope of being loved. To stop outsourcing your confidence to the gaze of strangers. To stop believing that your highest purpose is to be chosen, when your actual purpose is to choose yourself. You think chasing makes you worthy of her? But all it proves is that you were never worthy of yourself. That's the tragedy. You chase because you think love will fill you. But real love begins when you no longer need to be filled. When you stop pouring out your power, hoping someone will bandage your soul. Diogenes didn't beg for bandages. He walked through life exposed, honest, free. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. So let me ask you again. When do you stop running? Because she is not the destination. You are. You hear the word love, and your heart still skips. You still want it. Even after all the letdowns, the unanswered texts, the empty promises, you still want it. Why? Because deep inside you still believe that somewhere out there is a woman who will redeem the pain. One who will see you, truly see you, and never leave. But Diogenes would glare at you and say, "You've become addicted to hope." And hope is the bait they use to tame you. That's what makes the chase so lethal. Not that it fails, but that it gives you just enough to keep you moving. A smile here, a compliment there, A late-night conversation that feels like intimacy but delivers nothing. And you bite again and again, not because you're weak, but because you were trained to treat breadcrumbs like feasts. Every time she gives you a little, you imagine the whole. You build futures out of fragments. You mistake curiosity for care, attention for affection. You keep showing up, giving your best self, leaving with less than you came with. You call that effort. You call it devotion. But Diogenes would have called it delusion. He once said, "I do not possess, so I am not possessed." Understand this. The more you invest in a woman who hasn't earned it, the more she owns you. Not intentionally, not even consciously, but power doesn't need to be malicious to be real. She controls your thoughts, your moods, your sense of self, just by being the one you can't stop thinking about. And while you're busy dreaming of her, what dreams inside you are dying. Every hour you waste chasing her is an hour stolen from the man you could have become. You could have been building. You could have been training. You could have been learning. You could have been discovering what you actually love, what excites your soul when no one else is watching. Instead, you sit paralyzed, waiting for a message that may never come. Checking your phone like it's an altar. Worshipping silence, living in suspension, like your entire existence is on hold until she validates it. Diogenes would have laughed at this prison you built, and then he would have torn it down. He once lived in a barrel. It's not because he had to, but because he wanted to prove a point. A man's worth has nothing to do with his possessions. He gave up the comforts everyone else was chasing just to show that comfort is a lie. You've built a barrel of your own, but it's not made of wood. It's made of obsession. It's made of maybe tomorrow and maybe she'll notice. You sit inside it, cramped, suffocating, but too afraid to step out, because stepping out means facing yourself. That's the part you've been avoiding. The silence when no one texts, the mirror when no one is watching. The man you really are when all the masks fall away and you fear him because you know he's weak, you know he's incomplete, you know he's hungry. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop fearing him and start building him is the moment you stop chasing women. Because then, finally, you have something better to chase. Yourself, Diogenes said. The foundation of every state is the education of its youth. He wasn't talking about classrooms. He was talking about discipline, about self-mastery, about the kind of training that turns a boy into a man, a servant into a sovereign. But who educated you? You were raised by movies that told you love is suffering, by songs that told you rejection is romantic, by influencers who told you, just keep trying, bro. She'll see your worth one day. That's not education. That's indoctrination. And now you sit here wondering why the chase leaves you empty? It's because the system trained you to be empty. To believe that your life's climax is not conquering your demons, not realizing your potential, not building something eternal, but being picked by a woman. That's why you'll tolerate disrespect. That's why you'll ignore red flags. That's why you'll rewrite your own boundaries. Because in the story you were given, she is the prize, and you are just the contestant. But Diogenes rejected that script. He burned it. He wrote a new one where the man is the prize. Because the man who is whole, the man who is free, the man who cannot be bought or bent, that man is rarer than gold. Do you understand? The man who doesn't chase is not alone. He is not bitter. He is not cold. He is complete. And that completeness is what draws people to him. Not just women, but everyone. Because everyone craves what they lack. And most people lack wholeness. They lack freedom. They lack authenticity. So when you embody it, when you stop begging and start building, the world feels your gravity. You don't have to chase, because people will orbit you naturally. But let's be honest right now, that sounds impossible, doesn't it? Because you still think wholeness is a myth. You still think solitude is a punishment. You still think love is the one thing that will finally fix you. But love doesn't fix broken men. It exposes them. You've seen it before, guys who finally get the girl, only to lose her because the same insecurities that drove their chase now poisoned their relationship. They become clingy, controlling, afraid of losing what they begged so hard to win. And then it ends. And they break harder than before. Because the truth is this: you can't keep what you begged for. You can only keep what you built for. That's why Diogenes was fearless. He had nothing to lose, because everything he had came from within. Can you imagine that level of freedom? To wake up and know that no one, not a woman, not a crowd, not a king, can take away your peace? That's what happens when you stop chasing. But here's the warning. To get there, you must suffer. Not the suffering of rejection, but the suffering of growth. The suffering of facing your weakness and choosing discipline over distraction. Because comfort is the drug that keeps you chasing. Comfort whispers, stay here. Keep hoping. Keep trying. Maybe next time she'll say yes. But discomfort. Discomfort is the forge. It's the cold morning run when no one's watching. It's the late night study session when everyone else is scrolling. It's the silence you endure instead of begging for company. It's the weight you choose to carry so you can become the man who no longer kneels. That's the work Diogenes wanted from you. It's not to wallow in rejection, not to romanticize the chase, but to use it as fuel. To let the pain burn away the boy and reveal the man. Because once you are that man, women stop being your mission. They become your companions. They stop being your gods. They become your equals. You'll see beauty, but you won't be blinded by it. You'll feel desire, but you won't be ruled by it. You'll taste love, but you won't starve without it. That is freedom. That is power. That is manhood. And make no mistake, few will ever reach it. Most men will die chasing shadows, calling it love, never realizing they've been slaves all along. But you have a choice. Right here, and now. You can keep running in circles, worshiping women who don't want you. Or you can stop, turn inward, and build the kind of life that no rejection can touch. Because here's the truth that Diogenes lived and died by. The man who chases is never free. The man who builds never has to chase. So ask yourself, what will you be remembered as? The dog who begged, or the man who stood? And before you answer, before you retreat back to comfort, back to chasing, back to the same old cycle, let me leave you with this. Every time you feel the urge to run after her, ask instead, what part of me could I be building right now? And if you choose building over begging, day after day, year after year, you won't just stop chasing women. You'll stop chasing everything, because the man who conquers himself never has to chase again. Think about what you've heard so far. Maybe it stung, maybe it lit a fire, maybe it made you angry, because deep down you recognize yourself in every line. Good. That anger is useful if you aim it correctly. Because the chase isn't just about women, it's about the way you live your life. The same instincts that drive you to beg for affection are the instincts that keep you poor, weak, and forgotten. You chase women. You chase validation. You chase comfort. You chase distractions. Always chasing, never creating. Diogenes didn't just call out men who begged for love. He called out men who begged for anything: fame, wealth, recognition. Because to him, begging for what you don't have is slavery, but building with what you do have is freedom. That's why he mocked kings. That's why he mocked philosophers. That's why he mocked everyone who thought their value came from anything outside themselves. He didn't hate women. He didn't hate people. He hated weakness disguised as strength. That's what chasing really is. Weakness, pretending to be courage. You tell yourself you're brave for confessing, for persisting, for never giving up. But deep down, you know it's fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. Fear of silence. That's not bravery, it's dependency. So what's the alternative? It's not bitterness. It's not withdrawal. It's not swearing off women forever. That's just another form of slavery, letting rejection dictate your life. The alternative is sovereignty. Sovereignty means you own yourself. Your time, your energy, your focus, your body, your mind. No one, not a woman, not a boss, not a crowd decides who you are. That doesn't mean you reject love. It means you don't worship it. It doesn't mean you avoid relationships. It means you don't collapse without them. You stand. Always. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing, you start attracting. Because need is repulsive. It's heavy. It drags people down. But sovereignty is magnetic. People feel it when they're around you. They sense it in your presence, in your eyes, in your silence. That's why Diogenes, the man with nothing, was respected by kings. Not because he chased their approval, but because he didn't. Alexander the Great once approached him, offering to grant him any wish. And what did Diogenes say? Stand out of my sunlight. Think about that. The most powerful man on earth stood before him, and Diogenes brushed him off like dust. Why? Because no king, no woman, No anyone had power over him. Now ask yourself, what would your life look like if you had that same energy? If you stopped treating women like queens and started treating yourself like a king? Would you still text her 20 times with no reply? Would you still plan your days around her attention? Would you still lose sleep over what she might think? Or would you finally walk your own path unapologetically, whether she comes with you or not? That's the man Diogenes wanted to find with his lantern. That's the man the world is starving for. It's the man you're capable of becoming if you stop running. But I'll warn you, the moment you stop chasing, the world will test you. She'll test you. Right? By pulling away to see if you follow. By tempting you with breadcrumbs to see if you bite. By questioning your worth to see if you break. And most men fail that test. They fold. They chase again. They return to the leash. Don't. When she pulls away, you keep walking. When she withholds affection, you keep building. When she questions your worth, you show her not with words, not with begging, but with the undeniable weight of your presence. Because here's the truth. If she's the right one, she won't need you to chase. She'll recognize your value and choose to walk beside you, and if she doesn't, she was never yours to begin with. Either way, you win. Because your life doesn't depend on her choice, it depends on yours. So the next time you feel that old hunger rise up, that itch to chase, that desperation to prove yourself, remember Diogenes. Remember the man with nothing, who had everything? He wasn't waiting for love to make him whole. He wasn't chasing shadows to feel alive. He was already alive, already whole, already free. And that's the secret. That's the answer. That's the reason men still talk about him 2,000 years later. Not because he was perfect. It's not because he was powerful, but because he was untamed. And in a world full of men on their knees, untamed is unforgettable. So let me leave you with this final challenge. Stop chasing women. Stop chasing validation. Stop chasing anything outside yourself. Chase discipline. Chase mastery. Chase sovereignty. Because when you conquer yourself, everything else either comes naturally or it doesn't matter. And that's when you'll understand what Diogenes meant when he said, "The only true freedom is freedom from desire." Till then, you'll run in circles begging for scraps. But once you grasp it, once you taste that freedom, we'll never beg again. So what will it be? The beggar in love or the sovereign in sunlight? The choice is yours.